Mic testing. Okay. So audiolingualism is based on behaviorism, and the objective is to instill new habits. One characteristic of okay, one important characteristic of one important characteristic of audiolingualism is that new material is presented in dialogue form. Okay, so it's scripted. Everything is scripted, and you engage in dialogue like a conversation. Also, audiolingualism depends on mimicry. So the idea is imitating what your professor is doing or pronouncing. You imitate. Imitation or mimicry is very important. Also, there's a lot of memorization of set phrases. There's also what we call overlearning. Okay, what do we mean when we say overlearning? Overlearning means practicing and practicing even when you've already mastered the skill. So, new material is presented in dialogue form, scripted, and audiolingualism depends on mimicry, memorization of set phrases, like you have a bunch of phrases and you memorize them. Like, I'm going to the blank. And then overlearning, where you continue to practice the skills even if you've already mastered them. And another characteristic of audiolingualism is that the first language is prohibited because the first language is composed of old habits that interfere with the acquisition of new habits. So no, the first language is a big no. And in teaching the new language uh, using audiolingualism, structures are sequenced by means of contrastive analysis and taught one at a time. So you use contrastive analysis to see which ones are the easiest and which ones are the hardest. And those structures that are easiest are put at the start. The structures that are hardest are given later. So structures are sequenced by means of contrastive analysis and taught one at a time. For example, you start with vocabulary words, then you teach word order. Okay. So words, vocabulary, plus word order, plus verb inflection. So the idea is structures are Ayan na pala. Ayan na pala. Okay. So structures are sequenced by means of contrastive analysis and taught one at a time. Structural patterns are taught using repetitive drills. So it's time I blank, it's time I blank, it's time I blank. So patterns are repeated using drills. You have repetitive drills, 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 drills. So structural patterns are taught using repetitive drills. It's time I ate. It's time I slept. It's time I. So there's so much repetitive drills. Now, another characteristic of audiolingualism is there is little or no grammatical explanation. There's little or no grammatical explanation. Rather, grammar is learned inductively. Inductively. When you teach grammar rules and then you give examples, that's deductive. Okay, when you give the rule, then you give examples, that's deductive. But if you give examples, you give examples, you give examples, more and more examples, and it's up to the student to formulate the rule, that is inductive analogy or inductive learning. Okay? Also, vocabulary is strictly limited and learned in context. Vocabulary is strictly limited and learned in context. Context. Now, there is also much use of tapes, language labs, and visual aids. There's a lot of use of. I wonder if you have seen a tape recorders like that one on the screen. So you see the red thing there, the red button there. So you press that for recording. The right arrow is for playing. The left arrow is for review. Ay, hindi pala yung dito pala sa ano na to, yung zero ang play. Yung right, yun ang forward, fast forward. Yung left arrow, yun ang review. If you want to record something, you press the red arrow and the play button at the same time. So sobrang daming ganyan, you know? And then you also have language labs where you go to something like a computer room, and then there's a specialized software where you say something and the software will tell you if you mispronounce something. So on the screen there's a text and you read the text. If you mispronounce the text, then the text turns orange. Okay, if you pronounce it properly, it turns green. And there's a lot of visual aids. Now, in audiolingualism, great importance is attached to pronunciation. Again, in audiolingualism, great importance is attached to pronunciation. Pronunciation is very, very important in audiolingualism. Now, when a person responds successfully, that response is immediately reinforced. The feedback is given. Good feedback, positive feedback is given. So successful responses are immediately reinforced. And there is great effort exerted to get students to produce error free utterances. Correct pronunciation, correct grammar, correct vocabulary, everything should be error free because audiolingualism doesn't like errors. Again, audiolingualism doesn't like errors. So great effort is exerted to get students to produce error free utterances. However, class, there's a tendency to manipulate language. Okay, there is a tendency to manipulate language and disregard content. The idea is you practice the form, but the meaning is not that important. Like when you say, I'm going to the mall, I'm going to the clinic, I'm going to the canteen. Hindi naman totoo yun eh. You're not really using language to communicate there. You're just practicing the form. Okay, you're not really using language to communicate. It's like trying to learn a bicycle by pretending you are riding a bicycle. Again, it's like trying to learn to ride a bicycle by pretending you are riding a bicycle, when in fact you're not really riding a bicycle. Because the emphasis is on the form but not on the meaningful use of language. So, in conclusion, audiolingualism is an attempt to apply the general approaches to habit formation into language learning.